good morning, and welcome to another video podcast of Porn News Today Live. Now, this morning, I'm going to go ahead and give my in-depth analysis of Jon Ronson's The Last Days of August, which is an audible audiobook podcast that was produced and put together to investigate and provide some commentary and even psychoanalysis in regards to the recent departure of a porn star known as August Ames, real name Mercedes Grabowski. Now, I'll tell you, one of the characters, or should I say people, that this particular podcast revolves around, a pornographer known as Kevin Moore, who was married to Mercedes Grabowski. He has some really good friends, because I'm not going to say who, but someone who is attached to the Adult Performers Actors Guild Union really went to bat for him in regards to his character, because this particular person was aware that I was going to listen to the audiobook, The Last Days of August. So upon my starting to listen to it, I had a very open mind, but I was highly suspicious in regards to that audiobook in actuality being some sort of a intimidation tactic against Kevin Moore to possibly get him to drop his lawsuit against Wicked Pictures. But I was completely wrong. The Last Days of August, from my perspective, is probably one of the best educational pieces that's ever been put together when it comes to the reality of what the adult entertainment industry or American pornographic industry truly is. I actually feel it should be required listening for any individual who plans to work within the porn industry, whether they be a performer or someone who works behind the scenes. Now, if you're planning to listen to this audiobook, my commentary and analysis most likely will include a few spoilers, so if that's the case, stop listening right now. But I wanted to put this analysis together because I've noticed that there are some individuals already trying to spin what this audiobook truly addresses, which is the fact that August Ames' death never should have been politicized. At least not in my opinion, because her death did not have to do with being bullied by the quote-unquote gay side of the adult entertainment industry. Her death had to do with the individuals who surrounded her, who she was as a person, and just the fact that it doesn't seem that a lot of people who did surround her lived by the golden rule of treating others the way that you in turn would want to be treated. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in to my commentary. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to read through some tweets that I posted as I was listening to The Last Days of August. And as I go through these tweets, which are all time-stamped in conjunction with the audiobook, I'm going to expand on a bit of what I had to say on my social media posts. And for those of you who would like to follow along or possibly review my social media posts in regards to The Last Days of August, just head on over to pornnewstoday.com and look for the article, Finally, Some Solid Clarity on Porn Star August Ames' Death, The Last Days of August, an audiobook. Okay, I'm at the 14-minute, 36-second mark of Chapter 1 of The Last Days of August. It's noted that August Ames' husband, Kevin, had access to her Twitter account after her death, where he posted his statement. But did he prior to her death, too? If he did, I wonder if he ever posted as her. That's something that I have wondered and thought about for quite some time, ever since the announcement of Mercedes Grabowski's death, and ever since her death has been highly politicized by certain individuals within the American pornographic industry when it comes to quite a few disputes between the quote-unquote gay side of the industry and the quote-unquote straight side of the industry. I'll just put it as this. Oftentimes, males in the industry who have certain agendas utilize their girlfriends or wives who are performers to spread certain ideals or mantras on social media. Because the reality is, the porn industry is always about the girl. Nobody really cares about the guys. So if a guy has an idea that he wants to get across or something to say, being that the girls generally have a larger Twitter following, why wouldn't they utilize their girlfriend's Twitter to get their points across? Or social media, for that matter. I'm not saying that that was the case when it came to Kevin and August, but it could have been, because he did seem to have access to her social media. And I wonder if when the pile-on occurred due to some rather unsavory tweets that she made prior to her death, I'm wondering if she made the tweets initially, or all of them, or if Kevin made some of the tweets, or if she was tweeting what Kevin was simply saying. Because for quite some time, Kevin has promoted the idea that it's dangerous to work with crossover performers. And I personally feel that that's an ideal that is rooted in bigotry, hate, misogyny, and possibly even a bit of racism, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Jon Ronson corroborates at the 20-minute, 52-second mark what I was told directly by Jackson Wheeler and his wife in regards to his tweet being sent 3 hours after August Ames had already passed. Ronson's team fact-checked that situation, so no one should utilize Jackson as a scapegoat anymore. Now, when it comes to this particular tweet, I highly advise that many of you watch the podcast of Porn News Today Live that was posted prior to this one, because I do go in depth in regards to exactly why adult performer Jackson Wheeler should never have been utilized as a scapegoat, should never have been blamed, because the reality is that Mercedes Grabowski never read the tweet that he posted that was directed towards her. In fact, Jackson Wheeler has gone through some things very similar to what I have had to go through over the years when it comes to harassment, stalking, and even having your family members doxxed and targeted. Back when I was a performer known as Monica Foster, and I'll tell you, that's part of the reason why I have really wanted to put this in-depth analysis together, because so much of Jon Ronson's book, The Last Days of August, truly took me back in time to when I was a performer in the adult industry known as Monica Foster, and quite a bit of what I went through upon my departure from that industry. I went through so much hate that was based in nothing more than racism. I've dealt with so many people targeting me who embody homophobia, not because I'm a part of the LGBT community, but because I have family members who are. So as soon as I learned about what Jackson was going through, I was like, now wait a minute. Are the same people unjustly targeting him the people who were unjustly targeting me? Now this is odd. At the 22-minute, 15-second mark of Chapter 1 of The Last Days of August, Jon Ronson refers to porn actress Mercedes Carrera as being a porn veteran. Laugh out loud. I don't think so. She just entered the industry in 2014. I highly suggest IAFD to fact check things like that. Now, before I expand on the tweet that I just read, I do want to preface what I'm about to say by stating that I'm actually very glad that Mercedes Carrera was a part of the Last Days of August project, because she's a very intelligent woman who provided a lot of insight when it came to the dynamics between August Ames and her husband. I was a bit thrown by her being labeled an adult industry veteran, because when I was an active performer, you weren't really considered a veteran unless you'd been in for at least 10 years. But hey, I guess things are changing. That's fine. And Mercedes Carrera, she's a very interesting woman. For those of you who would like to learn more about her, check out an interview that was recently released featuring her that was conducted by a pornographer known as Holly Randall. Holly's podcast is Holly Randall Unfiltered. At the 32-minute mark of the last days of August, August's best friend, Emma Hicks, states her husband attempted to control what information was shared about August. But strangely, around the 36-minute mark, Mercedes Carrera is consulted by Jon Ronson again. Why is she in this so much? And you will learn why she was in this so much, but I was a bit confused again as to why Mercedes was consulted, but we're going to get to that. But Emma Hicks being brought into the equation was interesting. Now, something I want all of you to keep in mind is that Mercedes Carrera, she's around my age. I think she's about 36 years old. Emma Hicks, I would say, would be in her 20s. Around the 39-minute mark of the last days of August Ames, Mercedes Carrera gets into how she really wanted to be August's friend, but felt Kevin Moore wouldn't let her have friends. I'm thinking August just couldn't relate to Mercedes. Not all young women want older female friends. From my perspective, it seemed that Kevin Moore did not want August to have friends who possibly could provide a bit of insight as to how the world works and how she should truly value herself as a person. Emma Hicks was more so August's age, so I think that Kevin probably thought he could control that situation a bit, and it was interesting that Emma did relate that Kevin attempted to dictate to her what should be said about August to the interviewer, Jon Ronson. And of course, at about the 41-minute mark of the last days of August, while Jon Ronson is interviewing Emma Hicks, who Kevin Moore did appear to allow August to be friends with, so far he just seems controlling, not crazy, Mike Quasar busts in. Why is Quasar everywhere? I almost wonder if Mike Quasar was asked to monitor what Emma Hicks had to say. Mike Quasar, he's been around for a real long time in the porn industry, a real long time. Actually, he's a part of a pack of guys who at one point in time were in a band together. Every once in a while, I suppose they still do their little reunion shows. But Mike Quasar was in a band with a man who I knew fairly well, who had a personality not too much different from Kevin Moore. That would actually be a very interesting audiobook to put together. Something that circulated around those band members, because those guys seem to be in the thick of things quite a bit. Oh no, at the 43-minute, 52-second mark of the last days of August, Derek Hay chimes in with his thoughts immediately after Emma Hicks relates that she's heard that Kevin Moore's exes are either dead or institutionalized. Jon Ronson, many girls Derek has represented are dead too. Now, later in the podcast, that point, which I made in my tweet, is brought up by adult actress Lisa Ann. Actually, this particular podcast did not focus on all of Kevin Moore's exes. There's one who is known as Veronica Lynn that was not mentioned. And it was surprising to me that she wasn't mentioned, being that, what was his name? Gene Ross, a veteran adult entertainment industry blogger, at one point wrote an extensive piece as to how Veronica Lynn's mother had to intervene in the relationship between her daughter and Kevin. But let's continue. Jon Ronson uncovers around the 48-minute mark that Kevin Moore had another wife between his dating Hunter Bryce, who's dead too, and marrying August Ames, a porn star who was repped by Derek Hay, known as Shazia Sahari, a woman of Pakistani and Saudi descent. This was the key. Shazia Sahari. And I'll tell you what's ironic about the Shazia Sahari connection in the last days of August. The only reason that it seems Jon Ronson was able to track down Shazia Sahari was due to an online manifestation of the bigoted hate that Kevin Moore has essentially preached for quite a few years. If that particular venue that led Jon Ronson to finding Shazia didn't exist, I don't think that we would have learned as much of the history of Kevin Moore, which is presented in the last days of August. But this Shazia Sahari connection, gosh, what that girl went through, oh my gosh. It really was a situation that I could tremendously relate to. Look for part 2 of Alexandra Mayer's in-depth analysis of the last days of August on an upcoming video podcast of Porn News Today Live. Welcome to part 2 of Alexandra Mayer's in-depth analysis and commentary of Jon Ronson's The Last Days of August. View part 1 on pornnewstoday.com. Warning, this analysis and commentary does include spoilers. It seems Jon Ronson was able to track down Shazia Sahari was due to an online manifestation of the bigoted hate that Kevin Moore has essentially preached for quite a few years. If that particular venue that led Jon Ronson to finding Shazia didn't exist, I don't think that we would have learned as much of the history of Kevin Moore, which is presented in the last days of August. But this Shazia Sahari connection, gosh, what that girl went through, oh my gosh. It really was a situation that I could tremendously relate to. At the 58-minute mark, Axel Braun jumps in and informs Jon Ronson about Kevin Moore having checked into the Agora Hills Sheraton Hotel the night of August's death. Then Emma Hicks and Mercedes Carrera relate August was seeing another guy and wanted a divorce. So I'll tell you, this entire podcast, it was basically a who's who of the porn industry. Actually, anyone who's anybody was featured in this podcast. There were a few people who I'm surprised they didn't provide commentary or allow an interview, but I think I know why. Because they didn't want to be attached. Yeah, Axel Braun truly did provide some information about Kevin, which led to Kevin being caught in a few lies, at least from my perspective, in the last days of August. It could be possible that Kevin was so stricken with grief that he couldn't recall certain details properly, but it's just very strange that he never would have mentioned that he checked into that Sheraton hotel in any other place, and that Axel Braun had to come forward about it. And it's also important to note that Axel Braun and Kevin Moore got into a bit of an altercation at, I believe, last year's Adult Entertainment Expo. Well, this is sad. At the 1 hour mark, it turned out the man August was contemplating leaving Kevin Moore for was in actuality married, with kids, and even older than Kevin. Her brother talks about her being unhappy in her own marriage, seemed to have low self-esteem. I almost wonder if this other guy that was brought into the equation was in actuality a decoy from someone that later we'll get into that she seemed to really have a bit of an attachment to. The fact that she wanted a divorce, that's interesting, isn't it? Because all this time, it doesn't seem from my perspective anywhere that Kevin Moore ever mentioned that. At the 1 hour, 15-minute mark, what August's brother relates is interesting. He claims to have felt Kevin's call to him upon August's death sounded scripted. What I think is being overlooked is that Kevin may be on the spectrum of Asperger's syndrome. Now, I'm not a medical professional, so there's no way for me to diagnose that, obviously. But I'm very, very familiar with what autism is and what Asperger's is. And there's some things about Kevin that, from my perspective, do point to him having a touch of Asperger's. And especially considering that he seems to be so much of an introvert, I think that August, being that she was such an extrovert and being that she was so young, wasn't prepared to deal with a personality type such as Kevin's. And if she'd never been around anyone who was on the spectrum before, she wouldn't have noticed. Not at all. Around the 1 hour, 16-minute mark, it's made known that one of the larger porn studios essentially holds women's pay hostage if they don't say in their exit interview that they had a good time doing scenes that are evidently abusive and overly rough. It seems that due to a lot of things that happened in August Ames' life prior to her entering the porn industry, she became a bit of a people pleaser. She seemed to want everyone to like her very badly. And I think that she had a hard time saying no. That's what I think. And that's something that I think a lot of female adult entertainers contend with. Just wanting to be liked, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved. And before August Ames passed away, she was a part of a pornographic scene that was very, very rough. And she performed in the scene with a male performer known as Marcus Dupree, who has a history of other women having voiced their complaints in regards to his performance style. So what's interesting about this is that Kevin Moore did appear to be in fairly high control of her career. And if she got roughed up on that scene and she felt that she couldn't say anything to Kevin about it, she would have been holding that in, and that would have hurt really, really, really bad. Really bad. You know, it's interesting to me because Kevin Moore, since August has died, has been spewing this mantra of, it's your body, it's your choice. But it seems to me, considering that multiple women who have dated Kevin have stated that he was in control of their no list. In other words, people that these girls were not willing to perform with. Whose body really is it? Is it their body, or have they relinquished control of their body to Kevin? You know, so I think that's something that Kevin needs to think about before he continues on his crusade of it's your body, it's your choice. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. At the 1 hour, 20-minute mark, August's brother relates that Kevin Moore is fixated on Jessica Drake, refuses to acknowledge that August felt violated by Marcus Dupree in rough scene. I'm thinking August's brother may wind up kicking a few people's asses. My heart really went out to August's brother. I believe his name was James in this particular podcast, because I think that even though he didn't say so, he felt a certain level of responsibility for not knowing more about what August Ames was involved in, not knowing about the types of shoots that she was involved in, not even knowing about the intricacies of what the porn industry truly is. At that 1 hour, 20-minute mark, you really do start to get a sense that Kevin Moore is a bit on that autism, Asperger's spectrum, because he does seem unhealthily fixated on Jessica Drake, who really had nothing to do at all with the death of August Ames. And I think that it's not even just the death that has him fixated on Jessica Drake. I think that Kevin's obsession essentially with Jessica Drake has to do with him feeling that he was creating another sort of Jessica Drake within August Ames. And that happens sometimes with these guys in the industry. They fixate on a woman who has attained a certain level of success, and they try to find another girl who they can groom to be akin to that woman. But the fact that Kevin, for some reason, doesn't seem to want to fault the interaction between August Ames and Marcus Dupree in any way, it just makes me wonder if the reason that he refuses to do that is because he doesn't want to fault himself for not having added Marcus Dupree to August's no list, or if in actuality it has to do with a tad of misogyny that he embodies. Maybe also it has to do with his associations within the porn industry. Maybe he doesn't want to piss somebody off. You know, Kevin Moore does seem to know the game of the porn industry quite well. And he wouldn't want to rock the boat when it comes to the politics of males often not being faulted when they treat women in some of the most horrific of ways. Finally, at the 1 hour, 24-minute mark, Jon Ronson interviews a photographer who is very real about the issue of older men interacting with women half their age in the porn industry and creating a damaging, dysfunctional, and unhealthy father figure culture. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Ronson, for addressing that particular point on a mainstream platform. Because I'll tell you, many years ago, when I was an adult actress known as Monica Foster, upon my entrance into the American pornographic industry, I was floored as to how many older men, I'm talking men 40 into their 60s, displayed such a high level of entitlement when it came to the manipulation of women under the age of 25. When it came to their expectations of them, when it came to how they felt that it was okay to control them, when it came to just how openly they felt that it was normal to bully so many of these young women. When I look at quite a few of the men that I've had to contend with since my departure from the adult entertainment industry, when I look at their ages and what they have had the nerve to say about me, whether they knew me or not, you just would never think that men 40 to 60, maybe even older, would regard young women in such a way. But the truth of the matter is that even though these men are chronologically 40 and older, mentally, they're emotionally and psychologically stunted. Really, when I think about it, today's American pornographic industry is highly comprised of men who embody something called the Peter Pan syndrome. About the 1 hour, 30-minute mark, very glad to hear the male chauvinism being addressed in regards to female adult industry talents' complaints of abuse often being ignored, dismissed, or labeled as mental illness. Jon Ronson did a great job with these interviews. Yeah, pretty much as a female performer nowadays, anytime you complain, the go-to is, oh, she's mentally ill, she's crazy, she's a whack job, she's bitter, she's angry, she's got emotional problems. Who's really got the problem? The naive women or the older men who never grew up? 1 hour, 45-minute mark. Pierre Woodman is brought into the equation as the search for Shazia Sahari continues. And it's revealed August's husband did not want Pierre working with her. Kevin just may have controlled August's no list. So again, we're going back to the no list. We're learning that when it comes to Kevin Moore saying, it's your body, it's your choice. Bit of a hypocrite, because it seems like he viewed August's body as his and he was making certain choices for her. But it's very interesting that Pierre Woodman is brought into the equation, because it was not that long ago that there was a bit of a scandal that took place between Pierre Woodman and a young female performer known as Serenity Hayes. Serenity Hayes was bullied and slandered by an individual known as Sean Tompkins of the Real Porn WikiLeaks, a man who extensively bullied and stalked and harassed and threatened me. And actually, it is through Pierre Woodman's forum that it has been pointed out by a Twitter account known as Performers Unite that Marcus Dupree, the performer who August took issue with when it came to her final scene, which was extraordinarily rough, it's come out through that forum that Marcus Dupree has a bit of a shady past. But then again, who in the industry doesn't have a shady past, huh? At the 1 hour, 47-minute mark, Jon Ronson meets with Lexington Steele to interview him about Kevin Moore's mystery ex-wife, Shazia Sahari, in a Whole Foods parking lot. And Axel Braun arranged the meeting. Now, this was a bit of a unintentionally comedic moment, at least from my perspective, in the last days of August, because Jon Ronson seems to have caught Lexington Steele a bit off guard when it came to Shazia Sahari. And I'm not going to say much about this particular situation, But what I will say is that Lexington Steele has a sort of business relationship, it seems, with Kevin Moore. So I don't think that he wanted to throw Kevin under the bus. But if you really listen to that interview segment, you will hear that it seems that Lexington was holding a bit back when it came to Shazia Sahari. Wow, 1 hour and 51-minute mark. Lisa Ann calls Jon Ronson and essentially threatens him about the project he's doing on August Ames. Claims he's making porn stars feel uneasy, but seems to try to coerce him into investigating Derek Hay. I don't understand Lisa Ann. I really don't. And I kind of don't want to, because Lisa Ann, it seems, has really been put through the ringer when it comes to the adult entertainment industry, but it's almost as though she carries with her a bit of Stockholm syndrome, because she will badmouth the industry to such an extent, yet she doesn't seem to be able to pull away or cut ties. Look for part 3 of Alexandra Mayer's in-depth analysis and commentary of Jon Ronson's The Last Days of August on the next Porn News Today Live. Welcome to part 3 of Alexandra Mayer's in-depth analysis and commentary of Jon Ronson's The Last Days of August. View parts 1 and 2 on pornnewstoday.com. Warning: this commentary does include spoilers. Everyone effing lies. They are the most uneducated, shady, criminal effing people I ever engaged with. A quote from Lisa Ann to Jon Ronson at the 1 hour 54-minute mark in regards to her view of the people who the pornography industry is comprised of. So that's the thing. She's willing to say something so horrific about her peers, but she won't walk away from them. I wonder why. 1 hour 58-minute mark. Lisa Ann states she believes The Last Days of August will trigger more suicides. Initially, I thought the same, but today I don't. In fact, this just may be the most entertaining and honest podcast I ever heard, but maybe only because I once dealt with the jerks. There's no way that this podcast will trigger more suicides. What this podcast has done is throw the doors wide open in regards to the personality types that the porn industry is comprised of. And the light that is being shown on those personality types is not very flattering, but it's real. And again, I think that this is a podcast that any individual should listen to in its entirety before dealing in any capacity with the porn industry. At the 2 hour and 6-minute mark, Jon Ronson outlines specifically how Kevin Moore utilizes divide and conquer tactics to attempt to control and manipulate social situations and people. Very astute observation of a certain type of pimp mentality. Yeah, I've encountered men linked to and within the porn industry who utilize those exact same types of tactics. Dave of the Luxury Companion, Sean Matthew Tompkins, aka TRPWL, Ari Scott Bass, aka Michael Whiteacre, and the list goes on. But Kevin Moore specifically does it quite well. And when I do look at how he politicized his wife's death to create a massive chasm within the adult entertainment industry, meaning gay versus straight, it points to him having a certain kind of mind. And like I said, I believe that he's on the spectrum. But I also think that he has a certain agenda, a very dangerous agenda, which I'm glad is being addressed in the last days of August. It's odd Jon Ronson couldn't find many in the porn industry who knew Hunter Bryce, because a ton of people knew her and were aware that she was close to James Bartolet of Galaxy Publicity. I smell another death cover-up. Hunter Bryce was someone who Kevin dated for quite some time, and she as well is dead. And Jon Ronson does relate that he couldn't seem to find anybody who knew much about her. And I find that strange because, you know, I'm almost certain Bartolet of Galaxy Publicity would have known that Jon Ronson was doing this project, because that man has his finger on the pulse of everything within the adult entertainment world. But he doesn't come forward in regards to her. Now, when Hunter died, there was some controversy and scandal surrounding her death, which was linked to a porn star known as Tucker Slane, who I think was one of the last people to interact with her. And Tucker Slane was put through hell. I remember when it happened. I actually interviewed him. And Tucker was blamed. And I don't think that was right. The whole situation actually reminds me a bit of how Jackson Wheeler was blamed. And a lot of people knew Hunter Bryce. I met her on a publicity shoot that I participated in when I was with James Bartolet's publicity agency, Galaxy. It was some sort of a promotional spot. I can't remember what for, but that was the day that I met a black porn star from a few decades ago known as Jeannie Pepper. And Hunter was there that day. So was another girl known as Angelita Valentine. But it should have been fairly easy to find someone who knew Hunter Bryce, but I don't think anyone wanted to come forward. That's what I think. 2-hour, 14-minute mark. A guy named Ryan McLean outlines a suicide attempt August had that resulted in her having to be taken to the hospital, but Kevin labels the incident a nervous breakdown. Too bad Ryan wasn't brave enough to tell her he loved her. Yeah, that was a little interesting diversion in the podcast. The entrance of Ryan McLean. I think Ryan McLean was very honest about what he observed between Kevin and August. And I think that August really felt that Ryan was a true friend. What's interesting about the fact that August had a suicide attempt prior to her death is that it parallels something very similar that Shazia Sahari went through, which we learn about later in the podcast. It's almost like the two women were one and the same. They weren't, but their experiences with Kevin were very similar. 2-hour, 30-minute mark. Shazia Sahari is located. 2-hour, 37-minute mark. Shazia Sahari goes into detail about Derek Hay and his abusive, unethical behavior. Her parents tried to save her from porn by institutionalizing her. Her parents felt Kevin pulled their daughter into porn, and he kind of did. So Lisa Ann, she did get her wish. She did, because we learn a lot about Derek Hay of LA Direct Models from Shazia Sahari. And what she says is horrific in the way that Derek Hay regarded and treated her. I don't think that he should be an agent. Not at all, because he doesn't seem to know his place. But what we hear from Shazia in regards to her parents' intervention, that actually parallels what Jon Ronson wrote about in regards to Veronica Lynn's mother when Veronica was dating Kevin. So Kevin Moore pretty much completely lied to Jon Ronson about Shazia Sahari. He was not a good husband to her, emotionally abusive. I'm glad she got away from him and performing in pornography. Yeah. In the podcast, Kevin Moore does paint a completely different picture of Shazia than what seems to be the reality. And that's not good. It makes me wonder, you know, how much does he twist reality when it comes to other things in his life? 2-hour, 42-minute mark. Shazia at one point attempted suicide while married to Kevin Moore as well. He had become emotionally distant. They were more like roommates from her perspective, opposed to husband and wife. Yeah, and that's, you know, again, that's why I think that he's on that autism spectrum, because it seems that he's good at playing a certain role to an extent, but then he gets tired. I think that a lot of males in the industry actually relate very well to Kevin Moore because he is so emotionally distant. 2-hour, 44-minute mark. Shazia Sahari's suicide attempt story directly parallels that of August's attempt that Ryan McClain shared. Kevin didn't visit her in the hospital immediately either. 2-hour, 45-minute mark. Shazia Sahari relates how she heard she could supplement her income as a porn actress by escorting, and she states Kevin facilitated her to do it. She says he drove her to a John while they were married. Shazia backed out at the last minute. Yeah. That right there told me pretty much everything that I need to know about Kevin Moore. He married a girl, claimed to love her, and then thought it was okay to drive her to meet a John to do an escort gig. That's not a good guy. That's not a good husband. That's not a good anything. Shazia Sahari also claims that Kevin Moore was basically in control of her no list, not too unlike what various parties stated about August. That all contradicts Kevin's "it's your body, it's your choice" mantra. 2-hour, 55-minute mark. An analogy to baby elephants in the circus is made by a female adult producer. Excellent metaphor in regards to the psychological conditioning adult performers often undergo. Wow. And I want to talk about that a little bit. It's a producer in the industry who's a female who did not want to be named that Jon Ronson interviewed in regards to August and her relationship with Kevin. And she related one of the best analogies I think I've ever heard when it comes to how a lot of female porn stars feel. She essentially said that in the circus, baby elephants are often chained to where they can't get away. And as they grow, they essentially, theoretically, could break the chains, but because they were conditioned as babies to think that they couldn't, they don't even try. So I think that what this female producer is saying was, you know, there's a lot of females in the industry who, when they come in, they feel suppressed and stifled. But as they grow and as they develop, they do have the power within to be able to break free and go their own way, but they don't, because they don't believe that they can. At the 3-hour mark, Those with a fairly trained ear can hear Kevin's voice crack a bit upon Jon Ronson inquiring as to the events involving the electrical outage the night August was found dead. This being an audio-only podcast reveals a lot. And it does, because you can tell in the podcast when Kevin is basically spewing lines that he's probably gone over in his head over and over and over again to various questions that he's anticipating, opposed to questions that he wasn't anticipating. 3-hour, 3-minute mark. Though Kevin Moore claimed the power was out in his residence for hours the night August died, the California Power Company's official report does not corroborate that. The company claims the power was out less than half an hour. And that report that Ronson obtained does directly contradict what Kevin Moore wrote as his initial statement upon August Ames' passing. 3-hour and 6-minute mark. August's brother states his focus in regards to her death is on Kevin Moore, Marcus Dupree, and Jackson Wheeler, not Jessica Drake. August's brother does not seem to fault bullying for her death. And again, I highly encourage a lot of you to look at the Porn News Today Live podcast prior to this one, because I do go extensively into how Jackson Wheeler never should have been utilized as a scapegoat. 3-hour, 7-minute mark. August's brother is pissed. He wrote a letter to Kevin he hadn't sent, saying, quote, "How dare you blame bullying for her death," end quote. He also says he refuses to believe her death was a suicide, and he's based his opinion of Kevin on what August told him. I truly hope that August's brother finds peace. I can understand his anger. And I don't think that we have heard the final end of this particular situation just yet. At the 3-hour, 10-minute mark, it's revealed that August's entire family is a military family. If Mercedes Carrera knew that, now I understand why she may have been fixated on befriending August. But would that have altered August's outcome? We'll never know. But upon learning that detail in the podcast, I completely understand why Mercedes Carrera felt so drawn to becoming a part of this project, The Last Days of August, and why she may have wanted to become friends with August, because they had a similar upbringing. And sometimes you do need friends who have a similar background to yourself. 3-hour, 16-minute mark. August's final scene is described. It's never been released. The situation sounds like it was too much, in my opinion, for what she could deal with at that phase of her life. Even if she'd done rough sex scenes before, she wasn't into it. And to expand on that, I think that the only reason she went through with the scene was an attempt to please Kevin. That's really what I think. Because he hadn't put Marcus Dupree on her no list, had he? 3-hour, 19-minute mark. August's last agent, Chris Kane, relates he'd been concerned about Kevin Moore and August Ames' relationship, as Kevin didn't seem to like people. He states it himself too, and was an introvert, whereas August was an extrovert by nature. I'm glad that they interviewed her agent, because he was more than her agent, it seems. It seems like he was a bit of her confidant too. And I just find it so disturbing that Kevin did it seems, take efforts to physically separate himself and August from really the porn industry community. I think he was living like an hour out away from the valley. And he just seemed to really view August as his property. The whole thing just kind of makes my skin crawl. Seems to me Kevin had the dominant personality, which didn't allow August to be herself. She was a people pleaser, in my opinion. And I'm thinking the only reason she submitted to the rough scene with Marcus Dupree was to validate Kevin's judgment. 3-hour, 22-minute mark. August's agent claims August stated she loved Kevin more, but wasn't in love with him. He says she was going to ask him for a divorce. Claims August felt like she and Kevin were living two entirely separate lives. In my opinion, she outgrew him. Yeah. Because when you listen to Kevin's voice, and I'm not talking about the tone, but I'm talking about just his speech patterns, he doesn't sound like a man in his 40s to me. From my perspective, he sounds more like a guy about 25, because I think it was probably around 25 that he became a bit emotionally halted. I think that he's a very emotionally stunted man. And even though August, it seems, had her issues, she was growing up. And she wanted more. She wanted an emotional relationship. And if he wouldn't give her that divorce, that would have definitely added to a lot of what she was contending with, psychologically, probably spiritually as well. 3-hour, 23-minute mark. According to August's agent, Chris, Kevin wanted to do family therapy rather than grant her a divorce. She did ask him, according to Chris. Another thing I want to touch on, August Ames was not American. She was Canadian. And I think that the fact that she wasn't American was a factor when it came to her marriage to Kevin. And I think that Kevin might have utilized that as leverage to try to keep her with him. And that's not right. Can't do that. At the 3-hour, 32-minute mark, Jon Ronson brings up the reality directly to Kevin Moore via phone about the issue of psychologically damaged young women, 18 to late 20s, being manipulated by psychologically damaged old men, 40 and older, in the porn industry. At the 3-hour, 33-minute mark, Kevin Moore states, "I don't think there's anything wrong with sex or pornography, but I think the business is very sick. There's the reality that for 20 years, I've lived a life that I kind of regret now." 3-hour, 33-minute mark. Kevin Moore continues by saying, "We are making a living off the backs of the mentally ill." I personally don't agree. I feel over half the time it's the mentally ill predators or sociopaths making a living off the naive and submissive in porn. Lots of deflection coming from Kevin, in my opinion, at the very end. But what he says is very telling. Maybe he's even talking about himself when he talks about making money off the backs of the mentally ill, because he was a performer at one point. I hope that Kevin listens to The Last Days of August, because it's kind of a, hey, this is your life sort of project when it comes to who he is as a person. I believe everybody can improve. Everybody can change. But you have to be able to really look at yourself in the mirror before you can become the best version of yourself. So, that's about it. I just wanted to share my analysis of The Last Days of August. I think that Jon Ronson did a spectacular job on the project. It's very stylish. I'm a fan now. I'm going to have to listen to more of his audiobooks. But I think I listened to this particular piece at the perfect time of my life, because it did bring up some old thoughts and feelings that I hadn't had about that world in quite some time. But for me, the last days of August was incredibly healing, because it made me realize, when it came to certain personality types that I encountered, who made me feel a certain way about myself, I now realize that the problem was not me. Not at all. So thanks everyone for watching another podcast of Porn News Today Live. Once more, I'm Alex Mayers. Bye-bye.